Welcome to the Builder Hacks Podcast, your go-to destination for cutting-edge strategies, time-tested systems, and invaluable insights to revolutionize your construction business and elevate your life. Join your hosts, Nathen Piper and Keith Meals, seasoned contractors who are not just in the trenches, but are also pioneering the future of the industry through Concord University. In each episode, we dive deep into the minds of the industry's most accomplished building professionals, uncovering their secrets to success and sharing actionable tips to help you thrive. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, our goal is to empower you to build a brighter future for yourself and for America. Tune in, level up, and let's build a better tomorrow together. This is the Builder Hacks Podcast. Build your future, building America.
I'm Nathen Piper, and this is Keith Mills, my great co-host, and we're going to be diving into some background.
We're going to be diving into you today is what we're going to be diving into. We're going to be finding out something about you and how you got to this point. And I think that's what everybody's looking for is, how did you create the success and with multiple businesses? I mean, that's the fun thing of it. So it's not just one construction company. I mean, you've got multiple different companies. So, and you started out, well, I'm going to let you get into how you started out. How this all happened, because it literally does go ahead and paint a big picture for people about what's possible. So, I mean, whenever you get started, and all of us start, and that's one of the great things that you'll find out. There's so many different stories, and that's what you're going to hear in this podcast a lot. So there's so many different stories of how people got to where they got to, and realize that can be you. So whenever you're going ahead and looking at this, I was just finding that industry, finding the way. So finding the person to work with. So, and let's find out a little bit about Nate. How'd you get started in this crazy industry?
Well, it's a big drawn out story. So we'll start back in some of the beginning pieces, but ultimately I was a rebel without a cause that kind of kept going. But yeah. I was that feral kid where I was too hyperactive as like a little child that my mom had to kick me out of the house and I had to go run around in the backyard. I wasn't allowed inside. A lot of the younger generations have those memes up of like, I survived drinking out of a water hose. Well, I did.
Yes, literally we did.
Literally, that's what we did. And so I was outside and I was always playing and engaging. And so it gave me a chance to kind of like build forts and, stack chairs and jump off things and build ramps. And so I always kind of had
all the dangerous stuff that we did back then. Yeah.
We didn't have helmets and knee pads and elbow pads and all those things. We had bandages.
That's why Nate and I are bald right now. This was our helmet.
So I've always been kind of like that rebel guy that kind of doing those things. But I think my first real interaction that I liked was when I was about 7, and I'm going to date me a little bit, but we had a VCR. And the VCR had gotten the tape stuck in it. And it was just, back then it was like, oh, well, the VCR is broken, And so I went to the kitchen, I got out a butter knife and I went to work.
The infamous butter knife screwdriver.
The butter knife. I was like, oh, this is a tool. It's like the chimpanzee and a stick, right? We're going to figure something out here. I don't know what it is.
Make this happen.
I'm diving into it. And so I worked on it and I undid the casing and I pulled the thing out and I undid the stuff and I'm looking at all these wires. I'm like, oh, this is crazy. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm poking at it. And finally I was able to hit something and the tape came out. And I was like, oh yeah, I know how to fix stuff. And this was back when a VCR was an expensive item and not everybody had one in the house. And it was like fresh and new. And my dad comes home and he was like, what did you do? And there's screws everywhere and pieces are missing. And I'm like, I got the tape.
And my mom, back then actually meant something. If you had rented that from Blockbuster, you needed to get that back to Blockbuster.
We got it from Blockbuster and my mom was so proud. She's like, oh, you did it all on your own. And my dad was like, what did you do to my VCR? And but that's kind of the moment that I realized that, you know what? I like taking things apart. I like building with them. I liked having a tool in my hand that gave me some kind of power, right? And I was over that piece.
Nate, did you put it back together?
Or oh no, I left it for my dad. I left it for my dad. Right. I was like, I did my job.
You were just the demo guy. Got it. All right.
I started off. I was like, I did my job. I got it out. You fix it, put it back together. put it back together.
Good luck. I don't know how they came apart. So
I don't
typical
know.
demo guy.
Yeah, exactly. I should have, I started off early. I understood that job. And so that's kind of how I got into it. You know, growing up, we kind of had a bunch of different construction project people in my family, right? I got uncles that had, different jobs and they did different pieces like flooring and painting and roofing and so it was always kind of part of that. And then my dad worked out in the
Did
oil
you work
fields
with
for a
them,
while.
Nate, or not?
I did later on, but we'd always kind of like go by and check on them. They'd be working on job sites. So I was always kind of familiar with it. It was always kind of like just a part of life, right? It's like Saturdays was built for, oh, you go play your sports and then you go onto the job site and then you clean up this or throw rocks here or pick that up or move this or so it was always part of my upbringing in my life and
Right.
especially as you get into kind of like middle school and things of that nature. And then my mother was an entrepreneur and my dad ended up becoming a psychologist. So that's two different head trips in the same household anyway. And so I I ended up becoming an early entrepreneur. I was always into that. I was that kid that would sell candy at school and try to do that.
Did your mom encourage you, or you just picked that up from her?
Well, my mom was she is an encourager, but she's also kind of like you ever heard the eagles that have nests? They teach their young how to fly. They
Kick it out of the nest
basically
and let that thing flop around.
yeah. I mean, they put them real high up in the trees or on the side of a
On the
mountain
back.
cliff.
Yep.
And then they're just feeding them and being all loving, and then next thing you know, they just kick them out, and the baby just flops around. Oh yeah, what's happening? Well, that's my mother, and she's done this to a lot of people, not just me. I was just the first employee, and so she's notorious for doing this. But it was a challenge for me to find success. Right? She never gave it to me; it was always earned. Right? And so there's a lot of life lessons in that we can dive into later. But one of the main ones is like go out there and try, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yep.
Put a best foot forward, fail forward, and we'll pick up the pieces and move over there. So
like that part that you said right there, Nate, is the thing that one of the biggest challenges with the education industry.
Yeah.
So is the fact that they teach you that you've got to be right in everything. And one of the biggest things that you'll find out when you start adulting, or when you get out into, if you ever decide to become an entrepreneur, so a business owner, is that you will fail a lot more than you will ever succeed. And the quicker you can come to terms with that, the more successful you'll actually be.
Well,
the faster process is all.
Yeah, the faster you get comfortable with failing, the faster you're going to succeed. It's just each hand come together. And that's one of the blessings that I had from my mother. I remember when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, she had a wedding cake business. She had a daycare that she was running. She was also a member of Blockbuster, right? So she was selling Blockbuster videotapes and Blockbuster organizations. Like she had like 4 or 5, like a wedding cake designer place. Like she had all kinds of entrepreneurial business pieces, and she was doing this to put my dad through college and take care of the household and all these different things. So it's like I remember those years, right? Like I was her biggest helper, and so it's like that's what kind of like launched me and to be able to do my thing.
So what do you think is like, and it's an interesting beginning to be able to see that, because not everybody gets the opportunity to see that. What do you feel you learned from that process that you took away that's been one of the most impactful things to help you grow where you're at now?
Well, there's quite a few, but I mean, I think some of the biggest ones is like, don't be afraid, always strive forward. It's never going to be perfect, but put your best foot forward, accept things as they are. Right. Like there's all these like life lessons that kind of like you just push through, like whatever it is, you just push through. You just never quit, never give up. You just keep driving, and it's not going to be beautiful, but it's going to work. And so take it as it comes, right? And you get there. And she had a unique upbringing, right? She didn't have a rosy colored silver spoon, right? She had to worry about how she got to school and worry about herself. And then she became an entrepreneur. My grandparents were entrepreneurs, and my great grandparents were entrepreneurs, right? So it's like 3, 4 generations down. It's like great great grandparents had a grocery store, right? And some of them were farmers and all this kind of stuff. And
so whenever, like, with all these different levels of entrepreneurs through your family, Nate.
Yeah.
So has anyone ever done the you want to work in the other person's business? I mean, I know you said you joking around with your mom and you were, one of the first employees and things like that. Did any of those, like, did your mom work in your grandparents' business? Did your grandparents work in your great grandparents' business? Or did they all start their own thing and ran their own route?
It's interesting. They all started their own thing, right?
Okay.
It's like they all worked inside of the other one, but then they got to a point and they started their own thing. They branched away. So it's like her mom and dad. Her dad was, he did a lot of different things. Number one, he was an insurance salesman, and then he was a car salesman, but he was also a gambler, and he was also a farmer, and he was also like he did all these different things to make money in a non-traditional way. And he did it in a way in which he enjoyed his life. And so but he was different than his parents that had a more structured farm kind of component and built it and went out and had the sign and where they sold stuff on the side of the road, and different than her mother's parents who had a grocery store, right? And they had a stable place. And then he had uncles and aunts. She had uncles and aunts that did different pieces, right? And it was all entrepreneur. It wasn't like corporate business. And I think a lot of that has to do with, this was the early 1900s, right? So it wasn't corporate America. This was America just becoming a corporation, right? Which means everybody was on their own and they were all doing their own thing. And so
it's, what, that part there, Nate, I think is one of the biggest things that's changed. So in the United States, I mean, it's like, if you look back at it, I mean, so many people came to this country just for that opportunity. So that your family lived and experienced is what it comes down to. And that's the part that I literally, for all of our listeners or viewers, if you're watching this on the video version of this, though, is the piece that I put out there is that's the part that's been forgotten about. There's so much training that's gone into getting into a job. So I'm working for someone else. And while if that's your thing and that's what you want to do, awesome. Realize there's a whole nother path. And that's like your family is the perfect example that everybody did something different. And I highly encourage that, because I know one of the big things that I always look at is if you look at people who had really successful businesses and then their kids get into business. So what happens to the business when the kids are in the business? And then if their kids get into the business, then what happens?
Yeah. Well, there's two things that happen. It either goes up or it goes down. More likely than not, it goes down because they did have to strive and struggle to kind of like learn.
That's it right there. Yep. They didn't go through the same thing. They didn't have to develop the same skills to be able to get to that level of success.
Yeah. And it's just kind of, lost in that piece. And I think, and so my mom was an entrepreneur. She's owned a bunch of companies. And then me and both of my sisters are entrepreneurs, right? And so each one of us has different businesses, and we all do, in different industries, and we kind of do, like, it was just embedded into us as individuals to like, hey, there's other ways to make money. Let's figure this thing out. And I figured it out in grade school.
And that's one of those, I love that fact that it's basically the culture of the family, the values of the family is to be able to go ahead and do this. And again, it's another piece that I would say, for people to pay attention, because what they grow up in is typically what they'll start out in. So is what it comes down to. And if you have never seen this before, like I'm a first generation entrepreneur. So like all of my family has always been, they've worked a job. They've always worked as an employee somewhere. And my parents, my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents, all of them had worked for somebody else, which is all well and good. I mean, it's how I got where I got right now.
Exactly.
The thing is, though, when you get to see that, you can be that person in your family, though. So if you decide to go that route, to step up to be the entrepreneur that changes the future literally of generations. So of people in your family, like literally what it did for Nate with all of the many people. So in his family,
it just
that have been that entrepreneur.
It pulls the blinders off, right? and it pulls the reins down so that the hardest thing to do in entrepreneurship is to get someone to buy into your vision, right? That is the hardest thing to do in entrepreneurship. And what ends up happening is that you have an idea or a goal or something that you want to try into. And the first people that you want to share this idea with is the people that are closest to you, right? Your family, your best friends, and all the rest of the stuff. And if they come from a mentality of like, I'm just doing my part in this function, they'll never be able to understand where you're coming from or what you want to create. And luckily for me, I've been blessed that my mother was this way. She married a guy that wasn't that way, but he was at least open for me to be that way because he saw the success that she was having and the way that she handled things. And so she encouraged me to like go out and do it, get out of here, start a lemonade stand, start a popsicle stand, mow grass, paint fences. I remember being like 12, 13, and I'd be like, and this was back when Michael Jordan was getting really popular, and he was coming out with the Jays, and I was like, oh, I gotta have some of those Jays. I gotta look good, And I went to my mom. I was like, Mom, can I get some of these? And she was like, huh, well, it makes sense to me that if you go and mow 4 yards, you'll have that money to go do that. I was like, okay, you're not gonna give me the money. But she gave me the idea of like, okay, if I go take this lawnmower and I go mow 4 yards, then I'll have enough money to buy them. And then that's what gave me the opportunity to be like, okay, well, she's not going to get them for me, but she gave me an opportunity to go get it. And so grabbed the lawnmower, went out, knocked on some doors, signed up a customer, got in, got done, got what I wanted. And then I decided I wanted the jumpsuit to go along with it. So I went knocking on some more doors. And then
it's and the one thing that I noticed from that, and that's the part that I love. So about the story there, Nate, is the fact that it's just the different mentality and a different way of thinking.
That's it.
And there's so many other people, whenever you grow up in that the family who has always been an employee, which means that someone's giving them a paycheck. So for most of those people, whenever they're looking for something, the answer when they go to their parents is it's either a yes or no. They're either going to give you the money or they're not. And then so often there's nothing painted as the next step if you want to do this on your own.
Right.
And that to me is huge, because what it did is it for you and for her, for whenever she was growing up, and for her parents, what it did is it showed you that you can do whatever you want to do. So you just got to put the effort into it. You've got to find a need that somebody else has, a challenge that somebody else has that you can solve. Well, and then you'll get the opportunity to go ahead and get whatever you want. And it's the ability to identify opportunity and figure out a way to get there is huge. And I love that fact that,
it's been huge in my entire life.
Your family is great.
Yeah. I mean, we all have our challenges. We're not a perfect family, right? We argue and fight and do all the things, but we at least had a solid we had a solid foundation to kind of like build on, right? And it's so true, because I've had so many friends that either they come from a wealthy family and it was just given to them and they never had to work for it, or they came from a non-wealthy family where they said, no, you can't have it, and then they stopped. And in both points, in both scenarios, there's a stop portion that happened, right? Like they never took the next step, right? They never, like the family that had it and just gave it to the kid, he never went out and tried, right? He never excelled forward. He just stayed in his little position and that was it. And the other person, he decided, well, if they said no, that's it. And what my mom did for me, what I'm so blessed with, is that, okay, this is maybe a no right now, but it's not a forever no. It's just a no from her. But hey, look, you have all these other things that you can do to be able to create that. And that's where it started for me, was like, okay, well, I want candy at school. Well, I got $5. Well, I'm going to want candy today. I want to want candy tomorrow. I want to want candy next week. All right, let me take my $5. Let me go buy some Now-and-Laters and some Skittles and some things like that. And I sell them off and I make $8. I'm like, okay, great. I'll eat this a little bit. I'll put this money back. I'll stick this in the bank. And I started playing with this mentality. And that's where I think a lot of kids need that are missing it. And I try to instill it in my kids. They're not allowed to sell candy at school anymore. That's bad. It's frowned upon.
Unless you're doing it to raise money for the school. So, yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's okay. Yeah.
That's a whole other thing. Oh, only if the money comes to us, then it's okay.
Right. Exactly. But we call that a monopoly in the business world is what we call that. So.
But I have my kids set up lemonade stands, right? And they go out there and they make a bunch of money. And it's like, I'm trying to do the same thing for my kids that my mom did for me, which is like, let me empower you to go out there and make money, right? And you choose how you want to make that money, but go out there and figure out how you want to buy your own stuff. And don't have to, and if someone tells you no, great. But what's the other opportunity? Don't just stop there, right? Like no's are just not now. They're not forever, And so what are you going to do?
That piece that you said right there is the key. So it's no, it's not, it's just right now. So it's not forever. So it's, you've got to find, you have to identify the opportunity to be able to find the how to get where you want to go, whatever that is.
Well, what I ended up doing is I changed the question in my mind. And the question in my mind became, how do I, or how can I, or how is this going to be possible? Not what is the problem, not is, what can I do? I don't ask those questions, right? I eliminate. It's like, how can I? I want to have a future-based question in my mind, because then that's what my mind's looking for, not what has happened or what can happen. Because what can happen is, there's a ton of things that can happen. How can is a more specific, targeted question, and we can get into like psychology pieces later. But that question, just forming that question, is like so impactful. Especially
what started you down this path?
Yeah, well, this is how I got started. It's like, okay, if you're not going to buy me the Jays, how can I? And she gave me the answer. It's like, okay, great.
That's even better. She gave you the way to. She gave me the answer.
She was like, well, you can mow 4 yards and you'll have the money. I was like, oh, that's right. I could. Okay, take the lawnmower and go out. I mean,
there you go.
So I mean, that's kind of how I started.
So as you went along, then knowing that background, so as you went through school and everything, then was the encouragement to go start a business right out of high school, or was the encouragement to go to college, or was it kind of left up to you? And then what did you actually do?
It was left up to me to make decisions. I mean, I was not a good pupil from the standpoint of, I thought I knew more than my teachers. I thought my time was better spent playing with my friends. I thought my educators were not very smart. I was a menace to society, just from the standpoint of I was going to do what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it. So let me preface this by saying, as a feral child that was able to have free reign, I took full advantage of my free reigness and challenged every authority figure I came across. So,
and if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, that sounds like me, realize that what that can a lot of times indicate is that, like, a lot of those qualities that those attributes that Nate just described for himself are attributes for people who would be very good business owners in one way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
So whether it's in construction, whether it's in something else, whatever the opportunity is, because that's what determines their success. They've got that. I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'll find a solution to the challenge. I'll find something I can go ahead and offer to somebody that's going to be something that they want and they're willing to pay for, and I'll deliver it the way it needs to be delivered. So all of those pieces come from exactly what Nate is saying. So if you're someone who's been in school and you're struggling, and you're like, this just doesn't connect, and I hate this, and why am I here, and why do I get it? You may have a different path. So this could be a different path for you.
Well, and then I didn't realize this until after I read Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that didn't happen until later on in my 20s, right? And that's the mentality that you have to have in order to kind of have the success. It was just bred into me early, and it just came in. as pure natural, like this is like the DNA of this individual was me, and that was it, and that was the path I was going to take.
Yep.
And so I was great in sports, and you know, tall kid, slender, and played every sport there was, and I really wanted to focus on that. And so my parents gave me, you do what you want to do. I only wanted to go to college to play sports. I didn't want to go to college to go to class, right? And I didn't want to go to college to be, anything else other than a star athlete at a D1 school. Like that's what I wanted, right? And so that's what I went.
So did you get a scholarship to go to school then?
Yeah, it's kind of hard. That takes down a different path. I'll get to that in a minute. But
Okay.
in high school, and my mom and I we joke about it to this day, but I purposefully try to figure out, what I had to do to be able to play high school sports, right? Meaning back then you had to maintain a 70 average,
Right.
to be able to play. So I would figure out in my class 4 curriculum, how do I get to 70, right?
Right.
and then that became the targeted goal. So I would go out and I'd figure out, okay, how many assignments do I have to do, and how many can I miss, and what do I need to get on the final exam to hit a 70? And there's so many times that I would come in and I'd be right there at the 6 weeks, and I needed to make a 98 on the test to be able to hit 70 on the dot, right? And I'd come in and pull out a 98 or 99, and I didn't open up a book. I didn't, I was kind of one of those kids.
The power of goals and motivation.
That was it. And I and I would proudly come home from school, and I'd throw my report card on the table and be like, 70 across the board. Guess who's playing this week? Woo woo. Now, and that was just my mentality. It's like, look,
right,
here's the bottom threshold that I have to hit, right? And I maintained that. But then on my Excel or my collegiate level of sports that I was playing there, I wanted to be able to excel at. So I would put all my time, effort, energy, focus, studying, everything
right,
into that. And I didn't put any of my time into the education. Mine was just like,
right,
I'm going to do the bare minimum of what I have to over here so that I can excel over here. And that was just my mind. That's where I was at, 14, 15, 16 years old. And it worked for me, and I did that. And long story short, I had gotten a ton of scholarship offers and even signed a letter and was going to go D1 and the whole shebang. But then, spring break happened and a car accident happened, and I lost a couple of friends, and I lost it as an individual, and I went down a different path, and I didn't go to school for a few weeks, and I ended up not walking the stage with my class, and I ended up having to go to summer school to get my diploma, and life happens. It's how you respond to life.
That's exactly it.
And I had a challenge there, and my challenge was, do I give up and just go get my GED? Because of the challenge of not being able to graduate my class or walk the stage with them and the whole shebang, or do I, pull my pant legs up and put on my big boy pants and go to summer school from 8 a.m. in the morning till 7 o'clock at night every day for an entire summer and get my high school diploma? And so I did that. And then I found me a junior college, and I went out to a junior college and got enrolled, and then walked on for the football team. And and it was a struggle for me because I was a highly rated athlete here in Texas, and I went from being sought after to having no opportunity, and then I had to create opportunity, and I had to create the opportunity that I wanted. And it wasn't a great opportunity. I had to fight. I had to struggle. I had to, get deep into it. And so all those challenges kind of came out of it. And it's just perseverance.
It's the big thing that and anybody that you talk to who has been successful has faced challenges like what Nate's talking about right now. And that's part of the key, because it creates who you are. It tests your resilience and your resolve. So to go ahead and do whatever you say you're committed to doing. And it's part of the key, because that's, as an entrepreneur and as a business owner, A lot of times it can be one of the loneliest journeys you can be on because very few people will understand what you go through on a consistent basis to create what you want to create. And that's even whether it's entrepreneur or business owner, or whether that's anybody's job that they've got. So if you're working in one of the trades, that can be the same piece. Realize we all know that. And that ability and the skills that you gain by moving forward and by reaching out. So for those of you who need to reach out to be able to talk, that's what we always encourage. It's one of the reasons how Nate and I ended up finding each other. So is that reaching out process that we do. So to go ahead and find others that are doing the same types of things to continue moving on. But that piece right there, to be able to develop the skills, those skills that Nate was just talking about are the pieces that anyone, no matter what you want to do, an employee or a business owner, oh, those are the things that you do develop over time to excel. Oh, and that's where the key piece on that is. So is looking for those opportunities. Every time there's a challenge, there's an opportunity to go ahead and develop a new skill set. The piece that I always look at, I know Nate and I are both very, very religious. So as far as those pieces go, and that one of the things I always look at when the challenge comes up is the question I always ask is, what lesson am I supposed to learn from this, God?
That's
Because
it.
I know there's always a lesson there.
Always a lesson.